Hello there. Welcome to the midweek devotional. And I hope that you have a Bible nearby or ears ready to listen or can open another window on your computer to bring up the Bible text. We're going to look at the 41st chapter of Isaiah. We're going to look specifically at verse 18. That's our focus verse. But we're also going to look a little bit in Isaiah 40 and at some other verses in Isaiah 41. So that's the general area that you want to head to, and I'll be reading from the New International Version today. So I wanted to complete this devotion yesterday and get it online for people to see, but I kept getting distracted. And this morning when I set to it again, I realized there were two things that were distracting me yesterday. The first is what's going on around us with the coronavirus and with all the concerns about that, not knowing, a lot of not knowing. But I find that I get attracted to media, that I want to have the radio on, that I want to have a news report on, that I want to have the TV on with the little streaming thing at the bottom. But I realize, and you might too, that you've got to limit your media. You need to get the information that you need, but you don't have to watch news 24/7. And in fact, that can often just increase our load of stress, and we just don't need that. So that might mean that you have to turn to your streaming service to watch something that doesn't have commercials. See if you can root around and find an old DVD. Find some CDs if you still have a CD player and listen to that, or use your iHeartRadio or however you get your podcasts. But step away from the media. Get what you need. Don't live there. There's enough panic out there around us that we don't need to be adding to those feelings of panic and unrest. We need to turn to God and know God's strength. And that's sort of where this devotion is going to go today. The second thing that was bothering me is where this devotion was going to go, and this Bible passage. The 40th chapter in Isaiah is one of my favorite passages in the whole Bible, and I kept veering back to that chapter instead of focusing on chapter 41, verse 18. And I'm going to read a few snippets from chapter 40. But this section in Isaiah is very poetic. And if you're not a poetry person, just keep going with me, because this is just the best that the Bible has. The poetry, the majestic splendor of God's creation. And we are continually called to read and examine the scriptures for how they might apply to our lives today. And even though this was written 2,500 years ago, give or take a few centuries, how does it speak to us? And it does speak to us, and we're going to take a look at that in a few minutes. Focus. Let's see if we can focus. That's the first thing. Get rid of the distractions for a few moments. And as it says in Isaiah chapter 40, verse 8, the grass withers, the flowers fade, but the word of our God endures forever. That forever word, that's what can help us today in our lives. In chapter 40 and in chapter 41, God is talking to Israel, the nation of Israel, who at the time this was written, we believe, were in exile. Long story short, they lost the war. Longer story shorter, in that day and age, often people were taken, when they were conquered, out of their land, moved to another land, and their skills and resources were often put to work in the service of that other society. While back at home, the workers of the land and the people who could maintain things were there, but they didn't have the structure of the government anymore, and so the people who had conquered that land could come in and take over. So that's what the situation was, and God begins in verses 15 and then in 16 to tell them what he wants them to do in exile, what they should be about, where they should be using their efforts. God says, "See, I'll make you into a threshing sledge, new and sharp with many teeth. You will thresh the mountains and crush them, reduce the hills to chaff. You'll winnow them. The wind will pick them up, and a gale will blow them away. But you will rejoice in the Lord and glory in the Holy One of Israel. So God is telling people of Israel that even though they are in exile, they are not to go to war. They're not to pick up that threshing sledge. If they were, God would make it a success, for sure. But God wants them in this time period to be proud of being part of Israel, to rejoice in the Lord, to glory in the Holy One of Israel, to share that idea among themselves and in their communities that they are exported to. They have this idea of God, the one true and living God, the same God that we worship today, and that they are to rejoice and make that their identity, make that their purpose for this time. God is saying, look beyond the temporary winds to the long term. Sounds like a good idea. As we look to the next couple verses, 17 and 18 in the 41st chapter of Isaiah, God talks about what the people need. God talks about their thirst. And again, it's in poetic form, but very overflowing with imagery that we can grab onto and understand. God is saying, the poor and needy search for water, but there is none. Their tongues are parched with thirst. But I, the Lord, will answer them. I, the God of Israel, will not forsake them. I will make rivers flow on barren heights and springs within the valleys. I will turn the desert into ponds of water and the parched ground into springs. God is confirming that it will not only be water for a thirsty people that he will provide, but abundant water poured out in many forms, in many places. So what's the connection? What's the connection from then to now? Are you thirsty? Are you parched? God will provide. God will not abandon you. God will care for you lavishly. Your thirst is probably not physical. If it is, go get a drink of water. That's easy enough. Our thirst is more likely to be spiritual. And this passage takes us there as well. With all this imagery of water, it's a pun if I say there's an undercurrent of another meaning. But there is, indeed, an undercurrent. And that undercurrent is that God's help is plentiful and in many places. It won't always look like we want. It won't always appear in the places we think. But just as this majestic poetry lifts us up and helps us see the soaring majesty of God and his help to us, God's help will lift us up and cause us to praise the Holy One of Israel. We miss it. I do. Goes over our head or under our feet. It passes us by. Or maybe we're the ones going too fast and it's standing still. But God's help is available. God's help is there. It helps to read the Bible. Good idea to pray. Sometimes you need to listen to a preacher. Sometimes you have to tune into reality, God's reality, and let that be your guiding focus in the midst of being distracted by all sorts of things. I hope this gives you something to grip onto today. I hope this gives you something that gives you some spiritual water, something to think about, something to help you, knowing that God doesn't abandon us. God doesn't forsake us. God is right there with us in it, no matter what. That is the promise of God. God's promises are good for how long? Forever. Absolutely. This passage in Isaiah, it can give us a knowledge in our head of what God has to say. He will provide. He will help. He will provide streams of water to our parched spiritual self. But it can also be a heart feeling, something that you know inside, that God really is with you, that God really is reaching out to you. Back to the 40th chapter of Isaiah. A couple verses just close this out wonderfully. Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young ones stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. Let's think about this idea of God helping us, God with us, God giving us strength, God providing water for our thirsty souls. Thank you for watching today. I hope this passage from Isaiah has helped you, has aimed you a little bit towards God, and made your day even better, knowing that God's strength is added to our strength if we will ask for it. My dog's barking. I better go. You have a good day.